Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the OB broadcast episode 15. Pretty sure it's 15. See, my problem with the numbers thing is that a lot of the podcasts I listen to either intentionally forget or don't check what number it is. Either that or they just don't address it at all. So I guess the experience I have with podcasts is, what number is it? Oh, you know what? It doesn't matter. How are we doing? It is a fine Monday morning. I think we're getting back to uploading and recording them earlier on in the week and getting them out there around that time. I know there was a bit of a delay after the previous podcast, which was the interview with Doyle, but I had a power surge in my house that completely fried my computer. Not like turned it off, but like killed, as in like I can't boot it in safe mode or anything, and I probably spent like a 48-hour period trying to fix it. So that's dead and buried. So we're we've got a new computer now, and we're just resetting everything. I don't know why I say we, as if it's like a company, you know. Oh yes, yeah, we had HR come and have a look at it, and then we had accounting come and see. No, it's just me, but I got it sorted. So that was the cause of the delay. But we are back on schedule now. Speaking of the Doyle's Customs interview, went really well. Hope you enjoyed. Very interestingly, I've had a bit of a back and forth with Doyle since the interview, and he said that he had a lot of fun and that he would be interested in coming on the radio show and I guess by extension the podcast more frequently. So I suggested maybe like once a month you come on, you do a bit of like an update on what you're doing, and I'll bring some stories that are art based and I guess just media based as a whole, and have a bit of a back and forth, because one of the things I've noticed about a lot of the shows at my station is that they are primarily two-person show. There are very few solo show. Well, I shouldn't say that, because it's probably like 60-40, the 60 being 2 or 3 person shows. But for the most part, I think the ones that are more popular at my station are the multiple people one. So, and even when you listen to commercial radio, there's very few like solo announcers, at least on the really big. So yeah, it will be good to chat a bit more with Doyle, just, because he's a very interesting person, and he's, I think we have good chemistry on mic, and B, it's good to, do a bit more content that is not just like a one-off interview, but, trying to learn how to bounce off a particular person more consistently. These are all skills that, doing the radio show and the podcast and doing interviews all helps build, so that, eventually, well, I say eventually, but hopefully sooner rather than later, I'll be a better, more well-rounded announcer. So what have I been doing? Well, I've been talking a lot about copyright on the radio show. I know I sound so boring, and I think if I wanted to get more traction on this, I would have like heaps of clickbait and be like, oh, Iggy Azalea. Why did I go for Iggy? I was trying to think of like some clickbait off the top of my head for like YouTube. And the first clickbait that came to my head was Logan Paul, and I said, I'm not doing that. And for whatever reason, the second thing that came to my head was Iggy Azalea. I don't know why. She's not relevant. I don't like her music, so I don't know why she came to mind. But anyway, we'll just go with that because that's what my brain formulated. If I wanted to, do better, I'm sure what I should be doing is like podcast, and then like in the thumbnail it's a picture of Iggy Azalea, and it's like, oh, she did what? All exclamation marks and capital letters and big red circle. The typical clickbait that you see. I guess if I wanted the podcast to be more popular, I would do stuff like that. But instead, I'm going to talk about copyright, because that's what I find interesting. No, I think those sorts of things get like a bad rap because they're uninteresting. But I think generally speaking, it comes across that way because they're said in an uninteresting format. And the reason I think that, and the reason I think I can put it in an interesting format, is I've been reading a lot about copyright in games and in like music and TV shows and stuff. And I think that's much more interesting than, your traditional concept of copyright, which is, 2 fat cats in suits just arguing over prices and money. So like the first one that comes to mind is Bandersnatch, right? And everyone should be familiar with Bandersnatch. If not, it's the Black Mirror movie. I've not seen it yet. Half of which, well, it's 50% because I don't really like Black Mirror, and the other 50% is because of like the copyright issues. But yeah, I don't know. Like I know that I say I don't know, and then I say I know, but I don't know why I don't really like. No, that's not true either. I don't really like Black Mirror because I find it too, no, not edgy, but it's just like every time you're on social media and you see a picture of like, some cartoonist has drawn a doodle of like, a whole bunch of people looking down at their phones and comparing them to zombies. I hate that. It's like so lazy. If you just like, what it does is if you're drawing the, comparisons between like zombies and people on their phone, or like, people being on their phone and being antisocial and the end of the world, regardless of whether or not that's right, it's so lazy and it's such a cop out. And what you're doing, you're not being like, really smart or cerebral. You're not like a philosopher. Basically, you're just making stuff that 50-year-old people are going to share on Facebook. And hey, that's fine, but then don't, A, pretend that you've come up with this great idea comparing, phones to zombies. And B, I'm uninterested. And I think that's partially the reason I don't like Black Mirror. It's not that, like, I have seen one episode, and it was not the very first episode with the pig, but the second episode where they're all in like little bubbles and the X Factor talent show type thing once they earn enough credits. That's the one that I've seen, and it is a good episode, right? At no point am I trying to say Black Mirror is a bad show, but I think it's the same reason I've really gone off like, zombie TV shows and zombie movies after the age of like 16, because I'm so over seeing like apocalypse type stuff, and they're all pseudo apocalypse, like they're all dystopian futures and like, either the end of the world or more often like, some really terrible interpretation of what the future holds regarding technology and how technology is like, warped the way we live. And I've not seen all 3 or 4, however many seasons, so I can't comment completely accurately, but that's just the general concept I get of it. Maybe it would be prudent of me to actually sit down and watch the show. But also, I'm aware that, unless I've been misinformed, that the name Black Mirror comes from your phone, and it's like when you look at it, it's like it's reflecting back at you, but it's like a black mirror. And if that's true, that just makes me groan. Just like, really? That's what? It's all low hanging fruit. That's what it is. And that's part of the reason that I don't like Black Mirror. Again, to really, really drive the point home, I don't think it's a bad show. So if you love Black Mirror, that's fine. I'm aware that it's a very good show and it's very highly rated, and for a good reason. But I'm just sort of overseeing dystopian stuff, and that's that includes like movies too. Like I don't think I've seen any of the World War Z or is Pacific Rim. Is that the one that I'm thinking of, where it's like Attack on Titan, but like with big robots instead of big people? I think that's the one. Basically, any of those like I watched like 20 minutes of Mad Max with my dad just because he was watching it, and I think I was waiting for him to do something, so I just sat down with him, and so I watched the tail end of it, and I just thought, why? Apocalypses, wastelands, the end of the world. What's that great Jimmy Carr bit where he says, the future's going to be great if you like fighting other people for oil with a spear made of a human thigh bone? Something like that. All that end of the world stuff is just uninteresting because, hey, we very well might face it. Maybe it's just preemptive. But yeah, Bandersnatch. The second reason I've gotten to in a very roundabout way is the fact that they're, I believe, still in a battle of copyright over the concept of the movie. And this is really interesting because I don't actually see a good outcome for this. So there's 2 sides of this. You can either take, the Bandersnatcher side or the ChooseCo side. Now, ChooseCo is the company that owns the Choose Your Own Adventure, either license or IP or whichever. So they're in a I don't want to say battle, but they're in a conflict over copyright at the moment. And basically, ChooseCo, which owns Choose Your Own Adventure, and if you might be younger and don't know, they were really popular back in the day. I mean, I only read 2 of them, so they couldn't have been that popular. But they were really, really interesting. They were like a book, and it would start off, you would read the first 3 chapters, and then it would say, oh, okay, so say you're doing like a I don't know, for the sake of Mad Max, right? We'll just do something in that vein because I mentioned it. if it says, oh, you're driving through the wasteland and you see like a broken down car with a person lying on the floor and they seem incapacitated. If you want to help them, like get out of the car and help them, go to chapter 3. And if you want to drive past, go to chapter 5, right? And then it might say, you might read chapter 3 and it's like an ambush and they try and attack you for your car. And if you skip to chapter 5, you might drive past and look in the rearview mirror and see that happen to someone else. Right? And if you do choose to help them, you might do the whole chapter and you're in this fight and it says, oh, you go to chapter 14 if you want to shoot a flare at their car, or go to chapter 63 if you want to, I don't know, duke it out with a couple of swords or whatever. So basically that's the concept of the way these books work. You couldn't read it back to front. You would read a chapter and then it would tell you where to go depending on what you wanted to do. And they were really, really cool because they would always have 10 different outcomes. It was a really interesting way of not only writing a book but telling a story. Now, Bandersnatch did a really similar thing. I don't think they had quite as many endings or opportunities for decision making, but it was within the same vein where you would be watching and you would say, oh, okay, you would, I guess, click a button on screen and choose which outcome you wanted to follow. And it was interesting because they didn't use the phrase choose your own adventure within the marketing very intentionally. However, they were very quick in the movie itself to reference the choose your own adventure books, I believe, from what I've read. Now, the conflict comes in with the fact that they've done this choose your own adventure style, right? They haven't called it that, but they've very much used that style. And because in the movie, I believe there's lots of, I don't think it's cannibalism. That's the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina copyright. Man, Netflix is in way too many copyright battles. Stop saying battles. But no, the Sabrina one was over cannibalism in part. Maybe I'll get to that in a minute. But with this one, it was over I guess gratuitous violence or violent acts or disturbing acts or something like that. And the reason they were suing is hey, they've taken our format. They came to this is I guess if there were a nail in the coffin for Netflix, this would be it. The fact that they went to ChooseCo, said, hey, we want to make this style of movie. Let's buy a license, or let us buy a license. And after some negotiating, they didn't actually get to a conclusion. So they went away without it, but they went ahead and made the movie anyway. But they said, ChooseCo said, hey, this is the issue. They've taken our format, and we believe that due to the, graphic violence or, gratuitous violence, whatever, in the movie, we feel and because it's so similar to our product, it's going to, A, hinder our chances of, making movies and, partnerships in the future. B, they're capitalizing off of a brand that we created that they're using unfairly. And C, people seeing that are going to associate with Choose Your Own Adventure and they're worried that it's going to negatively impact sales accordingly. Now, it's a particularly interesting case because, like I mentioned before, I don't actually see a good outcome. No matter who wins, I think it's a real sad state of affairs. And this is why. I think if Netflix wins, that they've been able to hijack a format, and they've been able to go to a company, say, we want to use your format, let us do it legally, and they've said, well, they've tried to come to a financial conclusion and they didn't, and then they've gone away and said, all right, well, hey, let's just do it anyway. And if Netflix wins this case, it means that I don't know if it sets legal precedent, but I guess at least it sets colloquial precedent that you can take a style and just use it and nothing's going to happen. And I don't know, I use the word precedent because I watched 7 seasons of Suits, right? But from my understanding, precedent is where, if it's never happened before, a ruling can be used to judge future rulings, right? So in this case, if, Netflix won and then a similar thing happened in the future, they might be able to say, oh, hey, look, this Netflix case, that set the precedent that TV shows could take a book format and use it without having to comply to copyright or without being in breach of it. And that's a sad state of affairs because I think given the fact that they went there looking for a license and they turned around doing it anyway, shows that they knew what they were doing was similar enough to warrant getting a license, but they did it anyway. And I don't think that's okay. However, the problem lies in the fact that On the other hand of the side, on the other hand of the coin, other side of the coin, other face of the coin. Anyway, on the other hand, if ChooseCo wins, that means they're able to legally say that yes, we own the rights to choose your own adventure, right? Which is a style of book, which, if they win, it means that it's also a style of TV show, right? Or like movie. I guess that, isn't quite as eloquent as I'd like it to be. But basically, right now they have the right to this format of book. But if they win this copyright dispute, it means that they will have the legal ownership over the idea of choosing your own adventure, whether it's in a book, in a movie, in a TV show. Don't know how it fares in games because it's a little bit different. And I think maybe they've been doing that longer. I'm not sure. Because, weren't there old games, I think they were MUDs? Or, text-based games where you could choose your own adventure. Hey, maybe they should sue ChooseCo. No, but if they win this case, and that means not only do they own the rights to that style of book, they own the right to that style of TV show and movie, right? Because they've set the precedent that, hey, if you want to do this, you have to seek legal counsel with us. You have to get a license. You have to pay us. Which, in turn, means they own a style of storytelling. Because if you break it down, choosing your own adventure, it's like a genre, right? It's a style of telling a story, right? And who's to say there's a difference between, a choose your own adventure and a horror, right? Because they're both genres. They're both ways of telling a story. There is some difference, but I feel like it's close enough to be concerning, right? So then what if the person that wrote the first horror, right? They come and say, well, hey, I made the first one of these. I, legally own it. I should be able to copyright it. And then people should have to pay me to use this style. Again, it's a genre, but it's a storytelling device. Just as, choosing your own adventure is. What about dramatic irony? That's a storytelling device. Can somebody own that? And then what about, less genres? What about just storytelling devices as a whole? Like M. Night Shyamalan, who's someone I haven't seen many movies of. I saw the Avatar one, and that made me go, I don't need to see any others. But he is well known for putting a massive plot twist at the end of his movies, or towards the end. That's a storytelling device. Who's to say he can't, trademark and copyright that? So that's the ChooseCo versus Netflix situation. It's kind of concerning because, like I mentioned multiple times, I don't know who I want to win. It's not like I'm rooting for one of two sports teams, but obviously somebody has to come out on top, and I don't see a situation where either person comes out on top and it's okay. Because when it comes down to it, I really do feel like Netflix was in the wrong. But at the same time, I don't want ChooseCo to be able to. It's not ChooseCo themselves. They're a smaller company, nowhere near on the size of Netflix, right? And I don't have a problem with them owning stuff, right, and making money. Like I mentioned, the problem comes in when they say, well, can we? Other people are saying, can I copyright this way of telling a story? Because it just goes down this rabbit hole of if everybody owns something, then you can't make anything. And I think we've hit a point in society where, wow, this is so preachy. But we've hit a point in society where it's very difficult to come up with new things because everything's been done before. I know I actually briefly mentioned the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina? The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and their copyright dispute. And I can't remember. I think I read somewhere that they've settled, but I can't recall the exact details. But basically, if you've not seen The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, it's basically a sort of reboot of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which was, a really old show. I doubt too many people have seen it. I think I've only seen a few episodes in passing, and that's because one of the free-to-air channels here in Australia does reruns of old stuff. I mean, MacGyver, I Dream of Jeannie, old stuff. Border, just before the black and white era finished, that type of old. Even though I think those TV shows I mentioned are a little newer than that. But anyway, the point is, it's a reboot, and it's really good. I watched it. I don't know. I'm a bit of a fan of magic type TV shows, and for a TV show all about witches, there wasn't a whole heap of magic. Funnily enough. But anyway, the concept of this show is, Sabrina is half witch, half mortal. Is a half warlock, because her dad was the magical one and her mum wasn't. But apparently in this, at least, I don't know if this is common knowledge, but a male witch is a warlock, which I didn't know, but I guess we'll go with it. Anyway, so she's half and half, and by the time she gets to her 16th birthday, that's the age where they start doing like, super magic stuff, like going to magic school and all that sort of thing. And because she's half and half, she exists with human mortals, and basically like the whole premise of the, like, at least the first half of the first season is not knowing which of the two that which that's so bad, but she doesn't know which of the two that she wants to be, and so that's where some of the conflict therein lies. But the magic school, I forget what it's called. It's something. No, it's not the dark arts. Something of the dark arts. That's Harry Potter. But basically, in the center of this school, because they visit it on multiple occasions, because some of the main characters, exist there. There's like this massive statue in the hallway of like, I don't know necessarily if there's a difference between like Satan Saint and then Baphomet, Bapophet. Anyway, they're just like, underworldly bad creatures, right? And, or like the baddest of the bad. Anyway, the dude with the goat head and the horns, but like the normal body, they've got a big statue of that with a bunch of children around and holding up his hand, and I think it's like, probably got some pentagram somewhere. But anyway, that statue, is the reason I bring this up, because that is the copyright dispute. Basically, they had this statue in like enough episodes that a group of people wanted to sue Netflix for their usage of it. There is a group of Satanists, I believe, that spent a whole bunch of money, like 200 grand or something, trying to, get artists to create this perfect statue to symbolize their group. I didn't read enough about it because I sort of thought I didn't really want to read up on Satanists. But I think their beliefs, it's not like anarchy, right? They don't believe in that, and I don't think they necessarily believe in, Satan and demon and devils and that sort of thing. But I think the root of it is, I don't know. I think it's vaguely sort of like, freedom to do what you will. So it's like sort of anarchy, but not really. Again, I didn't read up enough about it, so, don't take this as gospel. I didn't do that on purpose, I promise. But no, don't take, that as verbatim. But I think that's roughly what it translates to, just, freedom to do what you will. I don't know. And anyway, the Satanists, this group of, maybe the Satanist group of America, it's a bigger organization than you would think. Basically, they spent a bunch of money getting this statue created by artists and sculptors to the point that they wanted it. And apparently it was incredibly similar, because they posted stuff about it online, to the one that ended up in the Sabrina episode. And basically they said, hey, they're using this piece of art, because it's a statue. A statue is a piece of art. They're using this piece of art that we spent a lot of money to get commissioned and created. They are using it, and we own the rights to it, which is fair. And they are, and we want them to either, I think it came down to, we want to either be paid or for them to give us credit for the design, or for them to remove the episodes with it in there, because A, the money situation and the copyright, but B, in the TV show there's a lot of association with cannibalism, and the Satanists, they're not cannibals, and they didn't necessarily want obviously didn't want the association there. And I think what ended up happening, and I haven't read up on this because I only saw it in passing, it was a while ago, but I think what happened is, in the credits of all of the episodes which it appeared, they gave credits, and I think there was like a lump sum they were given, and they're going to change it in future seasons and episodes. I think that's basically the conditions that they came down to. Not 100% sure, but I think it's roughly within that vein. But yeah, Netflix, just a lot of copyright issues. It's weird because and I guess it comes back down to YouTube, where, well, it's similar to YouTube, Netflix, which is, it's a platform that's got its problems, but it's sort of like the giant. They've almost got a monopoly on it. So what are you going to do? But me personally, again, I don't have like a professional opinion. However, I am invested enough in this, and I, read up about, certain aspects of this, and really just the core elements of the argument enough to, again, not have an opinion that's worth hearing necessarily, but an opinion that I at least think is fair. And so here's another one, and it's good. It's about Red Dead Redemption, and that's I can put that in the in the tags, and hopefully one other person will click on it because people still like Red Dead Redemption. Not that you shouldn't like it. I put a lot of hours into it, and it was a lot of fun, but I didn't think it had the longevity that people were still playing it. Well, I guess people that played it from day one. Anyway, so the copyright issue that Red Dead 2 is facing is over the use of the term Pinkertons, and it's really, really interesting. It's not complex, but it is interesting. Basically, they use the term Pinkertons throughout the game as this sort of, I guess they're a government or independently funded agency that tracks down, like an investigations agency, sort of PI mixed with government police force, that type of thing. Basically, because I don't know, spoilers, you're playing as outlaws, right? But you're constantly chased by these two Pinkertons, and in multiple occasions you have a couple of shootouts. I'm sure it's not probably a big spoiler. It's I don't know, can you spoil a prequel game? I don't know if you can, but anyway, the Pinkertons chase you around, and you interact with them a lot, and for whatever reason, the people that still exist today as Pinkertons were upset by this. I don't know, because it's always weird. It's like in Breaking Bad, where the main character is not a good guy, and the main antagonists are usually, is it DEA? I think I've been watching too much Narcos, but anti-drug police officers, right? They are and I'm using air quotations that you can't see, but they're the bad guys in Breaking Bad on some level. But they're good people. Like in real life, they would be the good guys. So it's a really interesting, way to tell a story, which is why one of the reasons Breaking Bad was such an incredible TV show. But in this, the Pinkertons, for the most part, very much the good guys, because you are playing as the bad guys. So it's interesting they would be upset, and I don't think they're upset about defamation. I think they're just upset with the use of the term Pinkertons without being, I guess, consulted or, paid royalties. Normally I don't pull straight from an article, but just for it to be, incredibly, specific, I'll just pull this bit. It says that the Pinkertons, now owned by Swedish security company Securitas AB and called Pinkerton Consulting Investigations, sent 2 cease and desist notice to Take-Two last month. I guess Take-Two created, in some parts, Red Dead Redemption 2 last month, either asking for a single payment or a royalty arrangement for Red Dead 2's use of the term Pinkerton throughout the story. And I've pulled that. That is, this is the not the wormhole, the rabbit hole of online journalism, because that is a quote from the Kotaku article about it, but that bit that I just read was a quote from a Polygon article. So there you go. I don't really frequent these sorts of sites, but this article is particularly interesting. Anyway, the most interesting part about this is that they've fallen back on the defense, very solid defense, mind you, that it's not them using the name Pinkertons for, to try and capitalize or to, unfairly use the name. It's for historical accuracy. Pinkertons were actual people, from the best of my knowledge, and they did what they did in the game. And the best part, and this is like a really simple copyright story, because there's not a lot to it. The Pinkertons are definitely not going to win this one because, well, at least in my eyes, the Take-Two, Red Dead Redemption side of things, they got such a strong reasoning behind using it. And the fact that it's historically accurate, they were real people that did the exact sort of thing that was depicted in the show. They weren't putting them in an unfairly negative light. And it's another thing is that, Red Dead Redemption 2 is not the only game or media property to use the term Pinkertons. Just from this article here, it said, here we go. The publisher's suit also points to the fact that Pinkertons are featured throughout any Western media seeking to from Deadwood to Bioshock Infinite. Which is interesting because I played Bioshock Infinite, quite a lot, and I don't remember the term Pinkerton, but I trust that it's in there. So I guess I'll probably bring an update. I mean, you're on the internet, you'll see it before I get a chance to record about it. But I will bring the updates to it as it comes out. But man, more than likely, Red Dead is going to be completely fine. Because why would they be able to sue? I recently picked up Subnautica, the game, and I don't know why I did, because it terrifies me. And I'll put this on the record, so it hopefully never happens to me, right? Or at least for a very small amount of time. But basically, if you ever need to get information out of me, just drop me in the middle of the ocean with no land in sight and at nighttime, right? And that's all you need to do. And I'll tell you whatever you want. And the worst thing is, I'm a really strong swimmer. That's not braggadocious. When I was younger, from the ages of probably, I want to say I always did swimming lessons, like the survival swimming lessons. But from maybe ages 12 through, 11 through 16, I did what's known as squads, which is, I guess here in Australia, that's what it's called. It's basically it's like going to the gym, but in the water. You basically just do laps over and over, and then you would say, oh, okay, do 8 laps of freestyle, and then you would go back to the end when everyone's finished. And then they would say, okay, now do 8 laps of breaststroke. And it was basically like a 2-hour workout session, but in the water. As a result, A, I'm never ever going to drown, but B, you really have to fight me to get back in the water because I've done my time, basically. But that notwithstanding, I hate the ocean. It scares me. Not being able to touch the floor, I don't like. I've been snorkeling, semi-recently, in the last 5-ish years, and it was probably 6 or 7 meters deep. So it was, well, that's probably a bit much. It was 4 or 5, and it was just off an island here in Australia, and it was deep enough that I could sort of see the bottom, but shallow. Well, that's how deep / shallow it was. You could see the bottom, but it was a bit of a distance down. That was snorkeling, and that's very much the most for me. I don't like deep water, don't like ocean. Pools are fine. I'm fine with pools. But the ocean just scares me. And I think it's, because there's so much of it, and it's so deep, and it's so hard to get to the bottom of it, and we don't know what is there. I mean, I'm not like a massive believer in monsters and aliens and supernatural stuff. Some of the things, yeah. But the one that always gets me is the Loch Ness Monster, right? I know this is a massive tangent, but I don't necessarily think that there is a Loch Ness Monster, right? I don't necessarily believe that there's this sort of plesiosaur type long neck water bronto in the Loch Ness in Scotland. It's in Scotland, right? Yeah, of course. I don't think it's necessarily there. However, if you were to say that it actually was a dinosaur and it was proven to be there, I totally believe you, because we don't know. And maybe this is coming from a Scooby-Doo episode. I'm not 100% sure. But from what I understand, there's the Loch Ness, but it goes quite deep, and there's sort of a cave system. And who's to say there's not a really deep, complex cave system down there where, some things exist that either, have hung around since prehistoric times or are just a type of, aquatic sea animal that we just don't know about yet. I think it's childish to say that we have seen every type of animal on land and in the water. So, hey, maybe there is a long neck swimming thing that does exist down there, and they just rarely ever come up for air. And if they do, it's rarely where we can see them. I totally believe, if it was proven, I would totally believe that, you know, it's real, right? Because it makes, at least plausible sense that, deep uh, network of caves, things could exist down there that we don't know. Anyway, that's part of the reason it just scares me, the concept of deep water itself, because we don't know what's down there. It's very difficult to get all the way down. Anyway, that scares me, like, a lot. Like, I don't, even when I was playing The Witcher, like, many years ago, and I was boating around Skellige, yeah, and it's like a network of, an archipelago of islands, and you can swim, boat between them, and there are like little hidden caches of chests that are like floating, and I would go out to them because I had to. Well, not because I had to, but like I saw them highlighted on the map, and I'm like, well, if they're there, you got to get them. And I would go out there, and there would be like monsters there, which is fine. I don't have a problem with like the monsters that swim around and then fly up and you shoot with your crossbow. That's cool. The bit that scared me to no end is when you're swimming down like 3 meters to get these chests, and then you look down, and it's actually making me uneasy just thinking about it. You just look down, and it's just deep, dark, and you can't see anything. I don't know. When I picked up The Witcher, I hadn't played any of the previous ones. There could have been like massive whale shark things that, or like the worms from Mario, the big eel worm things. There could have been those. I didn't know. It's just scary. So that just, sets the scene of the fact that deep water scares the hell out of me. So you might be wondering, why did you buy Subnautica? I don't know. It's interesting because it's one of those games that has from what I understand, I've only put in like 9-ish hours, but it's one of those games that has like some story element. Like there's a through story that you can do and complete, but there's also like a, sandbox survival Minecraft style thing. And I don't know. I don't think it's as polished as I would have liked. Like the progress is really difficult to follow, I've found. Like you got your scanner, your like PDA, and it gives you like hints and clues on where to go next. But it's really not clear on where you have to go and what you have to do and what you have and haven't completed. I know it was like one of those games that was in early alpha, and then because there's a whole bunch of games that are in early alpha, but very few of them become fully finished, and even fewer become good games. And this is like, it's a good, enjoyable game. The building is fun, building underwater, like these bases, the way it all comes together. It's cool, it's enjoyable. The concept of having like an underwater base is fun, even if it scares me. I don't know, as you would expect, my base is like very, very shallow, like 20 meters shallow instead of, 200. But that's fun. And, all the different vehicles are really cool, and there's not many weapons, but there's a bunch of tools that are interesting, right? There's a bunch of different stuff to the game. But I found that following where to go and how to get there is a little bit difficult. Like, for example, there is a bit, and I won't talk about it because that's like story, but there's a bit that occurs, and then in your PDA, it gives you like rough ideas of where you have to go, and it gives you the depths. And obviously, you can only go so deep. And even when you get like different vehicles, they can only go so deep. But it doesn't really give you like a clear roadmap on how to get that deep, and then what's going to get you that deep, and then how to get the things that are going to get you that deep. Like I don't feel like it's clear enough. And maybe I just like, I like my hand being held a little more in games than, the average person. But I don't know, I feel like it's somewhat unclear. Like in other games, it's very apparent. Like when you're building stuff and you like different resources for different things, it's very apparent. Okay, you've got. I want to use Warframe as an example, but I don't think it's the best example. But I'll just use Minecraft as the very, very basic example, right? Where you start above ground and there are trees. You use the wood to make wood tools, and then you dig down to use the stone to get to stone rather. And then you collect that stone to make stone tools, and you collect you use those stone to collect iron, and you use that iron to collect iron tools, right? So there's a very linear path on that. But with Subnautica, I found that, sometimes I'll just be like in the very starting area and I'll scan something and it'll give me the blueprint for it. And I'll go to, look at what it requires. And it requires things that I have no idea what they are, where they are, how to get them. I don't know if they're things that you have to naturally find or you have to make. And I don't know, I feel like it's either unclear or it's very easy to skip those in-between steps. The game itself is beautiful. Like, it looks phenomenal for the most part. There are certain areas of the world which are so deep that it's hard to get a good light source, and then from there it's hard to sort of, say whether or not it looks nice. But, lots of the shallow coral reef, foresty type plains underwater, basically all the areas that you can see that they have enough light to be able to judge, they all look really nice. The designs for all the ships and all the constructions that you do are, really clean and crisp. Lots of whites and sort of these, whites and greys and, nice curved shapes. They all look really good. Like, the designs are really, really well done. There is some voice acting in the game, and voice acting I found is always really hit or miss. But they've done a good job. The voice acting sounds good. None of it sounds like overacted or unenthused. The sound is phenomenal. It's really weird. Sometimes you'll just be, in your base or above water or underwater, basically anywhere, and the music will start playing. And it's one of those games where it has no business having music as good as it does. Like, I'll be playing and this song will come on and it's just such a good song. And I think this is far too good of a song, or far too enjoyable of a song for, like, just swimming around in shallow water. It all sounds like really upbeat, enjoyable boss battle type music, but for whatever reason, it just plays throughout the game. And quite often, I feel like even though it's really, really good music, it doesn't always match the scene. But the music is great. The gameplay is fun, it's enjoyable, it's pretty fluid. It's sometimes unintuitive, like tab sort of is escape, at least on the keyboard and mouse. And the amount of times you go, oh, okay, I'm in this menu, I'm just going to hit escape to get out, and you end up pausing, is frequent, because that's what you're used to it being. I don't know, tab seems to be everything, in menu, out of menu, which is fine. But other than that, the controls are quite good and intuitive. It's interesting because normally I talk about how tight controls are being a good representation of how enjoyable a game is, or at least, the quality of the controls themselves. But in a lot of the ships and the moving around, the controls aren't necessarily tight and responsive. However, given the fact that, 99% of the game is conducted underwater, it sort of makes sense. Like, quite often you're either, swimming or you're piloting something rather unwieldy. So you wouldn't necessarily expect the controls to be, super tight and responsive. And, that's fine. I think it makes sense and it works for the game. I think it's for the betterment of it. So I still couldn't tell you why exactly I picked up Subnautica. I think it was a combination of it being on sale, plus a couple content creators I've seen recently start playing it and, had good things to say about it, so I thought I might pick it up myself. A combination of the sale, the recommendations online, and in all honesty, it was the fact that part of it was that I had a bit of Steam money in my wallet that I didn't realize I had, so I thought, oh, well, it's on sale, may as well. I was actually tossing up between that and Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 2 or 3 on Steam. They got remastered, and Rayman on GOG Games. And it was those two because my favorite genre of game, it's so sad, but my favorite genre of game is like this really dead genre, and it's sort of like 3D action adventure puzzle platformer, right? And if you go, well, that's just a bunch of, genres thrown in together. What does that mean? Basically, just think about Spyro, Ratchet and Clank, Banjo-Kazooie, Jak and Daxter, that type of game, right? That's my favorite genre. I love having different levels. I love having different collectibles. I love having, different worlds and power-ups and a story and a big, 3D open world where you jump on platforms to progress through the world. I love it. It's the most fun thing in the world. And for whatever reason, that genre of game it's really hard to find new games like it. Mario Odyssey, brilliant example. The recent Ratchet and Clank, I think, came out in 2018 or 17. That was a brilliant love. Well, I don't know if it's a love letter if it's made by the same people, but a brilliant newer rendition of the genre of the game. And Spyro, the Spyro Reignited. I hope I didn't mention that one twice, but yeah, they were all great examples of taking that game in a modern context. But it's just a really, I don't know if it's outdated or fell out of favor or if it's just dead, but it's a genre you don't see too much anymore, unfortunately. I guess, I don't know, I think that genre of game was popular until zombie games became popular, and I think, battle royales now are taking over that zombie genre. But it's sad because it's, they're so enjoyable, which is why I wanted to pick up, because Rayman is a great game. Either Rayman or Tai, because they're fairly cheap and fairly enjoyable. But yeah, that's what I was tossing up between that and Subnautica, and I went with Subnautica because I thought, I've played bits and pieces of both Tai and Rayman, and it would be good to play a game from the start that, is new and fresh. However, in saying that, I'm probably going to end up picking up Tai on Steam, the HD remaster. And then, because I'm an idiot, I'm not even going to play it on the keyboard and mouse. I'm just going to plug in a GameCube controller because they're more comfortable. I think that does it. I actually had a massive list of things that I was going to talk about, but I think I spoke about copyright and Subnautica for close to 50 minutes. So I'm going to call it here, and anything I missed that I was going to talk about in this episode will be in the next episode. So thank you very much for listening. Expect more interviews on the way and more, mini segments with Doyle. I hope you enjoyed the interview that I did with him last week. But yeah, like I mentioned at the beginning, what's going to happen is if, he's still, willing to, probably going to jump on the podcast, on the radio show for 5-10 minutes every, couple of weeks just to have a bit of a chat. And yeah, I would plan to put those segments here on the show, here on the podcast. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you have a good one. And until next time, don't text and drive.